What's up, and welcome to this installment of 5 Minutes of Faith. I'm your host, Reverend Nash.
I'm Mrs. Candace Nash.
And this is part 3 of our Cultivating a Christian Marriage series, and we're going to talk about infidelity. My wife is going to be reading from Genesis chapter 38, verses 24 through 26.
And it came to pass, about 3 months after, it was told Judah, saying, Tamar, thy daughter-in-law, hath played the harlot. And also, behold, she is with child by whoredom. And Judah said, Bring her forth, and let her be burnt. When she was brought forth, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, By the man whose these I am with child. And she said, Discern, I pray thee, those whose are these, the singing and bracelets and staff. And Judah acknowledged them, and said, She hath been more righteous than I, because that I have gave her not to Selah, my son, and he knew her no more. May the Lord bless the reading, hearing, and doing of his holy word.
Good job, Candace. So today, my wife and I are going to talk about an important topic for any marriage: infidelity. For the purpose of this conversation, we are going to use a much broader definition of infidelity. You see, oftentimes when people talk about infidelity, they are talking about cheating or adultery, and that's not wrong. However, today we are going to explore how infidelity is more than cheating and how infidelity can affect your relationships. But before I get into that, let's give this conversation some biblical context. So what's going on in this scripture? The passage my wife read is part of one of the most intriguing stories in the Bible. The story of Judah and Tamar interrupts the story of Joseph, which begins in Genesis chapter 37. That's just a previous chapter from what she read. After Judah convinces his brothers to sell Joseph into slavery, Judah gets his reckoning. Not only does he lose 2 sons of his own, but he gets caught in fornication with his daughter-in-law. I mean, that's some really crazy stuff. But see, Judah had promised his youngest son to Tamar, Shelah. And since Tamar was his daughter-in-law, but Judah had second thoughts once his son grew up. However, Tamar would not be denied and devised a plan which ended with her getting pregnant by Judah himself. Now there's all kinds of bad behavior going on here, but it all boils down to Judah's infidelity. When he broke his promise to Tamar, he destroyed the trust in their relationship. So today, we're going to talk about infidelity as a breach of trust. Now, wedding vows are an essential part of the Christian wedding tradition. Trust is essential to the life of any relationship. So in verse 24, Judah finds out that Tamar has broken his trust. Judah, feeling a certain type of way about it, says that she must be burned. So our first question today is, what is the best way to respond to news that your partner has been unfaithful?
Well, I know if it were me, I would not be so nice. I believe that whenever infidelity is in play, I believe that that is a conversation that you and your spouse should have to try to figure out, what happened, around what time, kind of establish a timeline, and then also look at everything on a broader scale. So I believe that that is most important. I know a lot of time when I do hear about infidelity, I hear about, the spouse approaching the other person. And the thing is, in my opinion, you make vows to your spouse, not to anyone else. Right. So whenever there is someone who goes outside of the marriage, that is on that person that made that decision in the marriage.
Right.
So I feel like that is a conversation that definitely does need to be had. And also, I mean, honestly, I believe infidelity can be too whenever, if you have a certain, trust or expectation for a relationship and it is not there or it's been violated, I believe that is infidelity too.
Right, and that's a little bit more of what I wanted to get into here with this question. Making it more than about just cheating or adultery. There are certain things that you trust that I will take care of as your husband, right? And sometimes I'm not faithful in keeping up my end of the bargain. And so when you find out that it may not be that I'm sleeping with another woman or anything like that, it may be that I haven't taken out the trash. Or maybe it's like, you're trusting me to be an attentive father to our children.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm not doing that. So even with the smaller things, like how does that breach of trust make you feel, and how do you respond to that when you feel that trust has been broken?
Well, first off, let me just say, taking out the trash is not a breach of trust. I mean, that's just an expectation I have as far as a chore you do. I don't think that's a breach of trust. But in the past, I have, chosen to do a few things I'm not happy about. Of course, shouting, not responding the way that I should. And then, of course, after 10 years, I had to learn, hey, this is not working. So I do rely on the help of my mother, and she gives me lots of tips as far as, hey, there's different ways to communicate than by shouting. You utilize what you have at hand to make that work for you. So, for example, something that you like to do on your days off is totally veg out. Like, he becomes a vegetable. He sits on the couch. He won't do nothing, y'all. He'll just like be in pajamas all day long. I have to beg him to do something. So, my mom's like, hey, just make up a list. Go ahead, give that to him and see how that works. So we've been trying that, and it's like worked out tremendously. It reduces a lot of fussing. Hey, this is my expectation. This is what I want you to do. And then, of course, something we do sometimes is I'll say, hey, when do you think you can get this list done by? And then you give me a time, it's a deadline you set. Cuts down a lot of confusion.
Yeah, and I think something that happened even in this biblical story was that Judah overreacted when he found out that Tamar was pregnant. And a lot of times, we as people in a relationship, we have a tendency to overreact when our feelings are hurt, or we feel that that the trust in the relationship has been breached and broken. So one thing I would say to a person is, if you feel that your trust has been broken, and you're feeling a certain type of way in your relationship, try your best not to overreact to the situation. Find out the truth of the details. Find out exactly everything that's going on. Sometimes it's plain as you can see right there in front of your face, and there's no need for an investigation. But other times, it might help if you just take a beat, take a breath, slow down, and just try not to overreact. All right, let's do the second. All right, so great job on that question. So now our second question comes from verse 25, where Tamar presents evidence that Judah is the father of her child. Since she could not trust him, she took action to protect herself. So how does a breach of trust change our behavior in our relationship?
So I think when you have a breach of trust in a relationship, you have to get that evidence that you need to prove certain things. That's why whenever sometimes, whenever it may be something as small as your husband likes to play video games, right? Or he likes to watch videos. He's distracted. So you might just have to record a video of him all afternoon, kind of showing him how he's acting. So, I mean, this could be 15-minute video, hour video, I don't know. But it's just a video to show him proof. Hey, you don't trust me when I tell you you're being inattentive, but I have proof now.
Right, and in this story, so Tamar was doing everything that she was supposed to do. She was a widow. She was wearing the certain clothes to show that she was a widow, acting like she had to be as a widow. But then, when she found out that the trust in their relationship had been broken, she had to take action to her own hands. So instead of just remaining as a widow and just continuing to wait for Judah to do the right thing, she had to resort to some extreme actions. I mean, she had to, if you read the story, she finds out where he's going. She dresses up as a prostitute, and then she gets those things from him, the ring and the staff and the bracelets, and they have sex, and then she holds on to those things as proof of evidence, and that's not the kind of thing that she was really known for doing, at least from what we've read in the story up to this point. She's kind of a person she's a woman who is acting the way that she should in her society, but now she's taking a big risk doing that because the trust had been broken in that relationship. So I know for me, whenever I sense that there's been a breach of trust in our relationship, and I've already gotten past the fact that I haven't overreacted, the fact that I have to question whether I trust that person in that relationship, it makes me act a little bit differently. I don't trust them with as many things as I used to. I don't ask them as many things to do as many things for me as I used to. And so therefore, it changes my behavior as far as like I always have to kind of keep an eye on them. Whereas before, maybe I didn't have to really, micromanage or watch them or anything like that. So even if it's in a relationship with somebody who's not your partner, but like somebody at work, if they break your trust, you can't trust them. Now you got to keep an eye on what they're doing.
That's where that phrase comes from. Keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer, because you have to watch them and make sure that they're doing, what it is they're supposed to be doing. They're being honorable.
Absolutely. So with this point, what I really want to encourage you guys to do is to make sure you monitor your own actions in your relationships. See how that breach of trust is actually affecting you and how you deal with other people. Because you might have to readjust that relationship. You might have to change and how you deal with those people. You may have to push them further out from your inner circle. Or you may have to, like if they're an enemy, you have to bring them closer. You may have to bring them in and work that thing out so that you can repair that relationship. So just make sure you monitor how a breach of trust is affecting your behavior and your relationships.
Cool.
First two questions. So we just have one more question, and it comes from verse 26 of this passage. So in the last verse, Judah says that Tamar is more righteous than him.
Wow.
How can we pursue righteousness when we experience infidelity in our relationship?
Oh, that's a good question. How can we pursue righteousness in our relationship once there's infidelity? Ooh, I don't know. I know what you can do. You can rise above the actions that person has taken and choose. It's like Michelle Obama says, when they go low, we go high.
Right.
So you take the high road. You choose not to, be messy and air it all on Facebook. Because trust me, it happens, even to the best of us. But
yeah, there's that kind of temptation to be petty with it, right? And
exactly.
Make it a tick for a tat, right?
Mm-hmm. And so you have to just make sure you're not doing that. That you take the high road, and because honestly, especially in marriage, it's something that you choose for the long haul. So you don't want to say anything crazy that you might have to regret, and people looking at you like, oh my gosh, she's still staying with him. If you don't say nothing, but you communicate, you work it out, you let them know, hey, these are my expectations, and you don't need to breach that trust anymore.
That's right. And what really struck me about this passage and that verse in particular was that Judah realized that the mistake that he made was so big that it was even worse than Tamar dressing up as a prostitute and having sex with him and deceiving him.
Desperation.
That the fact that he was unfaithful to the promise and that infidelity and that breach of trust in their relationship forced all these things to happen, that was a bigger mistake. That was something that was a worse action than all the things that Tamar did in response to that. So that's something that we often have to look at when it comes to righteousness, is that oftentimes, people may try to do things to us and we can react to them in a certain way, but if we overreact or if we decide to do things to be petty or try to go tit for tat, that's not really pursuing righteousness, right? Everything that Tamar did was try to make sure that Judah made good on his promise. And even though she had kind of an interesting way to go about it, that was still the goal, was to make sure that the promise was fulfilled. And so at the end of the day, even though Tamar took a quite eccentric route to go about making sure that the promise was fulfilled, she still ended up being judged by Judah as being more righteous than him, because at least she was faithful to the promise where he was not. So the way to pursue righteousness, for me, my encouragement for you would be to make sure that you remember if you're in a marriage, the vows that you've taken and you're encountering infidelity, or you remember whatever the trust level is in the context of your relationship. Remember what your bargain, what your part of that is, and don't ever give anything less than that. Don't let the other person dictate to you how you are going to act. Don't give them that control over your life. Make sure that at the end of the day, you are the one that's pursuing righteousness in all of your relationships. Well, anything else you want to add to that?
No, it's good.
Okay, so that'll do it for this episode of 5 Minutes of Faith. I'll save the prayer for the end, but I just want to remind everybody who's viewing this to check out our Facebook group, our community Facebook group on Facebook. If you've already done so, thank you very much. Also, make sure that you like this video, you subscribe to my channel on YouTube, you share this video with friends, family, loved ones, anybody who you think could use this kind of information in their lives. And with that, let's go ahead and pray, and that'll be it. God, I thank you for everyone who's watching this video. I thank you for the fact that you have built us to be a people who desire relationship, and that you built us to be a people of integrity, and that, God, you have given us the tools necessary